time. This is going to be recorded and I will share this out on LinkedIn. I do apologize for the technical issues with StreamYard. I tested everything this morning, then at noon, then an hour before. And you know, technology, once you go to use it, it doesn't want to work. So welcome again to How to Design Engaging Online Courses. My name is Holly Owens and I'm an instructional designer at Amazon with Amazon PillPack. So we are owned by Amazon Pharmacy. I will get into a little bit more about myself, but first, can everyone see the presentation and hear me? Fantastic. I have so many wonderful resources that I want to share with you. So I do have some QR codes and some links here. So it's going to, later on, you can take some time to go through those resources. You don't necessarily have to look through everything right now. And I have my wonderful former grad student, Josephine Coco, who is now an instructional designer. She's going to help me moderate the chat, and she has helped get everybody from StreamYard to Zoom over here. But like I said, this will be recorded and will be sent out. I'm so excited and I'm so looking forward to sharing my experiences and everything with you about designing online courses, the things I've learned over the past 10 years. So in taking a look at our agenda tonight, I want to go through some online learning stats, what's happening in the industry. I want to make sure that we're clear on, you know, what's happening with COVID and how that impacted online learning and online learning at higher education institutions, you know, e-learning, those sorts of things. So I have a few stats I want to share with you. And then we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about the different phases of the semester. So really, when I start to design online courses, I break it up into different phases because I have to figure out where everything needs to go. And in my mind, I have to say, okay, this is what I need to do at the beginning. This is what I need to do during the semester, and this is what I need to do after the semester. So we're going to talk about that. I also want to talk about EdTech tools. So I love educational technology. I run an EdTech podcast. So a lot of these tools I have used, most of them in the classroom itself. I've also interviewed some of the founders and CEOs of these technologies, so I just want to share some of those. And then, of course, the takeaways. I have a plethora of resources that I want to share with you so that when you leave this session, you feel adequately prepared to create an online course that is not only engaging for your students, but also on the back end, you feel pretty prepared as you are setting things up. So let's get into it. Let me turn my annotation off. All right, so let's talk a little bit about me. Just want to say that, again, thank you so much for popping on over to Zoom and, you know, with the technical issues. But my name is Holly Owens and I'm an instructional designer with PillPack by Amazon Pharmacy. This is a very recent change for me, jumping out of higher education into corporate instructional design. I'm loving it so far. It's, you know, there's a lot of different challenges in corporate, just like in higher education, but it's definitely a great learning experience. As I said before, I host the EdTech podcast, and that podcast, we interview founders and CEOs from different educational technology companies, and we just have a good time talking about their stories, how they created the podcast, or how they created their technologies, and then we share it out. And I've met so many wonderful founders and CEOs who are very much in tune with what's happening in education. So if you get a chance to check that out, please do. We're on hiatus right now until next month. And then I'm going to have some more people on the show. So be on the lookout for that. Then I also teach online, which is why I'm here. So I'm a former high school teacher turned instructional designer in higher ed. And I've been teaching online since about 2012. at various higher education institutions. Most recently, I teach with Toro's Graduate School of Technology in the Instructional Technology program. I teach 2 courses, which are the Foundations of Instructional Design and the Designing Online Instruction course. So these are the courses I teach. If you have questions about that program, you can talk to Josephine or me. It's a really great program, and I've been teaching there for 4 years now. All right. So now I want to know a little bit about you. So I have a Slido. So if you want to go to another tab in your web browser, or if you want to grab your phone and you can scan that QR code, or you can type in slido.com and then the number. I want to know, in what sector do you work? So give some people some time to join in. You have some higher education peeps. I feel like right now I'm just straddling both. I'm in corporate and I'm still in higher ed because I'm teaching, so it's fantastic. And if you don't mind, in the chat, if you're answering the other, what's the other? If you put that in the chat, that would be fantastic. All right, so we have quite a diverse crew here. We have the P to 12 group, the higher education and corporate, and then the other as well. Nonprofit organizations, fantastic. We have people looking for opportunities in this field. Love that. All right, so let's go to the next question. What is your current role? What do you do at your organization? And if you're an educator, you can just use the faculty. Are you a CTO? Are you a CIO? E-learning developer, learning experience designer, instructional designer? What role do you have? And I actually set up these questions that you can pick more than one, because I was an instructional designer at my institution, but I was also a faculty member. Excellent. Lots of different people, lots of great things. And I'm really glad that a lot of faculty are here. And I hope that through this, you'll share some of these resources and information with your fellow faculty members. I know that many institutions have wonderful, like CETLs, Center for Education and Teaching Leadership. They're all called different things to support you. But I hope you'll share out some of these resources. So let's take a look let's talk about some fast facts about online learning. So as you know, online learning is really huge. You talk about online learning, e-learning, they all fall under this big umbrella. And by 2026, this particular industry is expected to reach $457.8 billion. That's crazy. Coming from the K through 12 world and jumping into higher education and seeing the resistance to online or e-learning, and now seeing that this industry is going to be invested in, it's going to be something that people are taking into consideration. They want to do these things. That's really, really positive. And I'm so happy to see that happening. So 2 out of every 5 Fortune 500 companies are taking advantage of e-learning. So any type of online learning, developing different types of modules and things. And this is just not, in higher education or corporate. There's government entities that use it as well. And if we come back to the education part of it, 70% of students agree that online classes are better than the traditional classroom setting. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about online learning. You have your own opinion. Obviously, I love online learning and hybrid learning. I think it offers a lot of opportunities for people who need that, who are working full-time jobs. There's flexibility, there's non-traditional, which are becoming mostly our traditional learners. And this is probably my favorite one that I found about distance learning is it uses 90% less energy and 85% fewer CO2 emissions. So we're helping the environment as we're designing online courses and e-learning. So those are just some fast facts for you to consider as you are thinking about your online courses. So I took a little bit of time to do some research, and I have been working on a dissertation in the background. So this wasn't difficult for me to find in the iPads and the National Center for Education Statistics. So from 2019 until 2020, and obviously because of COVID, this happened there, it's related a lot to that. There were 2.4 million people online, and now in 2020, and I'm sure it's more now, there's 7 million. That's 186% increase in online learning. So here on this chart, you see the various 2-year, 4-year institutions, the private, nonprofit and for-profit, and where that all falls. So this is the percentage of people who undergraduate enrollment who are enrolled in online courses. And the explosion of the growth, and then now the conversations that are happening about, is online good? Should we be using it? How can we make it better? For institutions, do we go to a hybrid model? So I'm really kind of intrigued by what's happening in this space, and hopefully we will see some more wonderful resources come out of everybody's institutions and organizations about online learning. So I just want to touch on, I don't want to bore you with a lecture. You can take my class if you want to learn more about these. So some models, theories, and frameworks that I base my planning off of when I'm designing online courses. Definitely the community of inquiry, developing that sense of community with your students and having them feel like they're part of a group and you're part of that group as well. When you're developing lessons, that Gagne's 9 events of instruction, the behaviorism, the cognitivism, the constructivism, all those different those theories that influence how we think and how we learn. And my favorite is backwards design. I always like to design with the end in mind. So where the students have to be or where the learners have to be, and then going back from there and figuring out all the pieces of the puzzle so that I can design an engaging and wonderful online experience for them. Just curious, and maybe you can type in the chat, what's your favorite model, your theory or framework that you use or that you've heard of in classes? So what do you like to use? Or backwards design, yeah. It's a really popular one. Gagne. Addie, yes, Addie's a huge one. Definitely. So as we jump into some of the online learning resources and advice I have for designing these engaging online courses, I want to know from you, what is the one thing you want for your learners to take away from this learning experience? So when you're thinking about designing your online courses, you obviously are thinking about your students, the audience, what they're going to be doing in the class. What do you want them to take away? So this is probably one of the first questions I start with, especially if I'm designing a new prep, or if I need to go back and redesign the course, or maybe just make some modifications. What do I want my learners to take away from this experience? This to me is the most important because I'm so student-centric in my design, and I always think about what would I like as a student as well, and what I want to have in my own classes. If there's any ed tech tools I want to try or things I want to highlight, how to apply this to their own life and professional experiences. That's a great one, that real world. New information that will help them position themselves for a better future. Depend on the learning, knowledge, or skills gap, definitely. Have you read Julie Dirkson's book, Design for How People Learn? She talks a lot about that. So it's really important that you consider these things as you start setting up your online courses. Confidence. Oh, that's a good one. I love at the beginning of the course, and the students are so quiet when they first come in to the first session or they're in the first module, and maybe the conversation on the discussion board is like minimal, but by the end of the term, everybody's participating and everyone is having a good time and developing that sense of community. Satisfaction with the learning experience, a desire to know more, and the confidence to try something new. Definitely getting them out of their comfort zones is a good thing, especially when it comes to online. And I'll let a few more come in. Know them better. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like by the end of the semester, I'm like, we just got into this nice routine and now you have to leave. And Josephine can attest to this because I'm always trying to hold back, like not getting too upset when my learners go to the next phase. Passion for the subject, absolutely. We want them to connect to that content. So let me make sure. All right. So let's jump into the different phases of the semester, because this is how I'm going to break up the presentation. So before the semester, there's a lot to think about in terms of setting up your online courses and what you want to do for the next term. I take into consideration. Oh, does somebody have a question? So make sure. Okay. I like to take into consideration looking at previous course evaluations, maybe what went wrong last term. Maybe I took some notes. So before the semester, I really like to set up my course and those getting started tasks, so that students, when they come into the class, they're prepared, having a fun icebreaker, having a fun, maybe a goose chase, an activity that they can do maybe in teams or get to know each other. So before the semester, you really have to think about what you need to do as an instructor to make sure that the students are going to feel welcome in your class, and they're also going to feel prepared and understand how to navigate the class. And then during the semester, what do? There's grading, there's creating modules, there's dealing with maybe different technical issues. So you really become like this manager of the community, like a technician. Sometimes you have to point them to IT support. And then finally, after the semester, the reflective piece of designing the online course and what you do after, and then that falls right back into what you're going to do before. So really reflecting on that experience that you had. And then in the center here, I have feedback. This is a feedback loop. So constantly soliciting that feedback from your students, not just waiting till the end of the semester or when you get those course evaluations to change things, because you can't do anything once they leave the classroom, the online classroom. You can't make things different. So having that constant feedback loop with your students is very important. So let's talk about your roles in the class, and then we'll kind of frame this within those different phases. So as a faculty member, you have a lot of different responsibilities. You know pedagogy, you know andragogy if you're teaching graduate students. You're the technical manager. If things in the LMS might go awry, you might have to point them, like I said, to IT. Or if you're setting them up with a new ed tech tool, you have to provide them with support. Managerial, figuring out ways to manage all the different assignments and things that the students have to do. And also, you're the SME, you're the subject matter expert, and you're the community manager. So you are the person who's maybe at the beginning, you're really leading the charge when it comes to setting up that community and modeling what students need to do for different types of assignments or in discussion boards. So you play a lot of different roles. And I can say that it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding work as well. And one of the things that I've always wanted is some sort of like checklist or some sort of, like journal or facilitation guide, something where I could take notes about where things are happening in the semester. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this webinar, because I would get to the end of the semester and then I would just copy my course, and then I would forget maybe in module 2 there was a issue with assignment 3 and I forgot about it, and then it came up the following semester. So that's one of the reasons why I set up, like I said, this webinar. So before the semester even begins, one of the things I do is I map out my course. I do an entire course map, which includes things like my measurable learning objectives, my assessments, the resources, so evaluating the materials I'm going to use. And I also have a section on my map for those technologies that I want to use to engage my students, which doesn't just include the LMS stuff. It includes stuff outside the LMS. So since I teach instructional design courses, that could be things like Storyline, that could be things like a Powtoon. Those are the things that I map out and I align with my learning objectives and then the program level outcomes to make sure that I am meeting those expectations set, by the accrediting bodies. Also, I review the class list. I find out who my students are. I may shoot them an email prior to the class just to give them a list of, what the books are, the resources they might need to purchase or that we're going to use in the course, or maybe instructions for how to log in to the LMS. So I'm already prepping communication prior to the course being open, and then set up those getting started tasks. So things that they need to do initially, maybe to be comfortable in your class. You have a course orientation video. You're getting them excited about the course. You're setting them up for success, not feeling like they're confused about different things. Where do they go to find assignments? How are things going to be graded? So really setting up your students for success starts with these things. One of my tips for this is actually before the semester is to set up your grading and feedback schedule. Grading and feedback is so essential to your students. They really want to hear from you, whether that is through written text or if that is through you doing an audio or video recording. So I set up my feedback schedule. Am I going to do grading on what day? And what time, and how am I going to offer the feedback? Am I going to use audio this time? Am I going to use video? Because some learning management systems have that functionality. So I'll set up a grading schedule for myself and I'll stick to it because the students get into that routine. So really this is important for that engagement from your students. And I find that when I'm making comments, either audio, text-based, or video, the students respond back to me in those comments. So if, for example, there's a paper and I have some comments about APA formatting, they'll respond back with a question. So it's another communication avenue for me and between me and the student, and it's pertaining to that particular assignment. So I really like to set up my grading schedule before and stick to it. Kind of like when you go to your job and you have your tasks that you do. So these are all linked resources that are a part of this presentation. So there's the course mapping guide. There is a website out there that you can download a course map template and you can add all your information from your course. This is something I recommend doing before the beginning of the semester. It doesn't matter if you've been teaching for 5 years, 1 year, 20 years. I really recommend mapping out and aligning your entire course and where you're going to have that student to student, student to content, student to technology, student to whatever interaction, because I did this recently and I found some gaps in some of the resources that I was missing some things in the content, and it really helped me align the material and also create some more fun and engaging ways to get my students involved, say with like a debate style using Parlay. Evaluating your resources. So really considering if you have newer resources, things that are 5 years or newer, if your institution uses a quality review rubric or if there's other types of checklist regulations or things that you have to do, really evaluate those resources, watch those videos, read those articles, making sure that that content and also the tech that you're using is applicable to your content, is aligned with those learning objectives. I already talked about the feedback schedule, and I've also linked to what I call the start of semester checklist. So I'm a to-do list person. The start of semester checklist, make sure that I have everything set up and ready to go before I actually open that course for my students. So that's all linked here. And I do have a QR code at the end of the presentation that links to a Google folder, which has all this information contained within it. So you don't even have to look for it. All right, so let's talk about what happens during the semester. So one of the things when you think about the community of inquiry model is the instructor presence. So you have to be present, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous in your course, whether that's participating in discussion boards, that's giving that feedback to your students, that you're just involved in the process. You are the facilitator. You're not overtaking the course. You're kind of backing off throughout the semester, but they know that you're there. And as the instructor, it's important for you to model what you want your students to do, whether that's behavior or if that's providing sample activities in the course, maybe for assignments, so that they get an understanding of what the expectations are for assignments, soliciting that feedback. I can't stress this enough because I've gone through an entire semester and waited, and I wasn't able to change things. So I have a mid-semester survey that I put into my course. Some people do weekly surveys, and the students are more engaged because they feel like you are providing them the opportunity to hear their voice. So I really encourage you, if you don't do like a mid-semester, at least like a bi-weekly or weekly, soliciting that feedback about how the course is going, that you incorporate one this next term. And then really reflect upon what you're doing each week. After, fortunately, I have synchronous online courses, so I get to see my students weekly. After each lesson, I reflect on what went well, what didn't, and I'm like, they probably thought that that was something bad, or I need to change this for next time. So I do take the time to reflect on that, and maybe I'll have a conversation and be vulnerable in my next, like, oh, that didn't go so well, so let's revamp things a little bit. And that's okay. That's totally fine. You're human, and your students will understand that. So during the semester, while you're doing all these other different tasks, you also have to make sure that you're modeling and you're present and that you're reflecting on what's happening during the term. Also, I am, like I said, a huge advocate for ed tech tools, and I'm going to do a session coming up soon on some of my favorite ed techs for you to use in your classroom. I have used Yellow Dig, which is a community gamified, interactive place where students can share resources, jobs, talk about different things, and that are related to the content. I use Parlay this semester for a debate style about if learning styles are real. Definitely Kahoot, that's a very popular one. Kami, Hypothesis, Annotation, Collaboration, and 7TAPS. 7TAPS is like micro learning, so breaking things down into chunks. And I can definitely go into some of these very specifically, but I'm going to hold back. And feel free to explore these or reach out to me if you have questions. So I would encourage you in the new term, maybe try one of these or try one you've seen come across and incorporate that into your classes to get your students more engaged and excited about the content. I'm going to pause real quick and make sure, check with Josephine, make sure I haven't missed any questions or things that people need clarified.
So far, you're doing great, Holly. No questions. Just letting everyone know if they're joining late, we are recording the session. But no questions yet.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, so phase 2 materials include the journal and facilitation guide. I'm actually going to open this link up and I want to show you what this looks like. So I'll go to that screen in a minute. The weekly or mid-semester survey, I have linked to the one that I use in Canvas. It is available if you do use Canvas at your institution. It's available in the Commons. I made it public. You can just import it right into your class, and it's like 5 questions. How do you feel? You know, what's going well, what's not, and then the QR rubric. So if your institution has something that they use internally, where they say this is what a quality online course looks like. Do you have a getting started? Do you have a course orientation video? Are you using accessibility standards? And I've also included a link to an online equity rubric. So this is important. So you're making sure that you're meeting expectations of like universal design, accessibility, all learners are included. So this equity rubric is also really good for you to use as you are maybe during the semester. Some of these you can use before, but making sure that you're meeting these expectations throughout. So let me pull up this journal and facilitation guide really quickly, just to give you a sneak peek of some of the resources that you're going to see. So this journal and facilitation guide is really something I love. I absolutely love. It talks about all the different tasks, all the different roles you have as an instructor, and what tasks you should be doing throughout the weeks that you have in your courses. So it breaks it up, and this is adopted from Berge 1995 and Hootstein 2002. So this is an adaptation to some of the things that they discussed in those articles. So weekly tasks, things you need to do from a managerial perspective, a pedagogical perspective, technical perspective. And then at the bottom of it, it has a weekly journal. So the journal is really about your reflective piece. So that's what you're doing during the semester. Maybe what did students contact you about the most? The most difficult concept, things that maybe you need to clarify for next week. And of course, you can adapt this to your own courses. You might not need all these things, but it's really useful. And I use this, and it's broken down by week. So like getting started is in week 1 is way different than going down all the way to like week 12 or week 14 for you. What are you doing to wrap up the semester? So this is one of my favorite resources to use when I'm thinking about engaging my students to make sure that I'm doing the things I need to on the back end so they don't have technical issues, and incorporating a lot of different ways to engage them in the sessions and connect with the content. And I can't say enough, and this is just a personal belief about having empathy in the classroom, especially nowadays with things with COVID and what's happening in the world. That also adds to you incorporating these things into your classes and getting to know your students. So I do use flexible grading, which is another part of what I like to do. And I allow students to submit things all semester. I have due dates, but I don't require, if they miss the due date, I'm not going to take off points. Maybe if it's a lengthy time that a lot of time that goes by and it's like 35 days late or something, I might take off 5 points. But I have low stakes and the high stakes assignments, so I'm a little bit more stricter on the high stakes. So that's just something to consider in this online space, especially with the state of things.
Excuse me, Holly, we have a few questions.
Oh, we have questions.
We do. We have a few questions. Everyone would love access to this.
Yeah.
As well as your weekly map. And they wanted to see it a little larger, but I couldn't get to you in time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I can, you know what? There's going to be a QR code at the end of the presentation and a link also included where you can go, and I have a whole folder set up and organized by phase for you so you can see all of these resources.
Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Will the recording also be there? Or
yes, as soon as it renders and does what it needs to do, it will be there, and it will be there with transcripts and captions. If you can't read QR codes, I have a link. I have a link to it. I have a bit.ly link.
We'll make sure we post both.
Yep, we'll make sure that we get everything to you. I promise. I would not share all the stuff and then say, hey, no, you can't have anything. No, it's all organized and ready to go for you. You know, despite the technical issues, I was very organized and ready for this presentation. All right, so let's wrap up with the final phase after the semester. So you've gone through, and by the time you get to then, you're very tired. You know, you're trying to get students to submit things. You're getting final grades in. So what you're going to do is you're going to be reviewing those course evaluations. And I encourage you, if you don't do that, to review them. I know a lot of instructors that I've worked with over the past 10 or so years. They just ignore the course evaluations and they don't listen to what their students are saying. And then they just the course doesn't change. It's just being done the same way all the time. You have to read those evaluations. You know, every once in a while, you're going to get, you know, those bad comments about things that didn't go well. Just take those with a grain of salt and like, it happened, it's over. But really review those course evaluations, because if 5 students are saying something, 6 students, 7 students, the majority, it's probably something that needs to change in your course. So then you need to go into planning those changes. And what I like to do based off those evaluations is to pick the top 3 things you want to make for the next semester. So what are the top 3 things you plan to change? So for next semester, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to add more audio to my overviews, which will include transcripts. I would love my students. I did it for a couple. They love the audios. I want to record more. I want to do more feedback audio wise as well and video wise for papers and higher stakes projects, and not feel so afraid to get on the camera and talk to them. Then go back to that map. What needs to change in the map? Were things misaligned? Did some sort of assessment not fit in module 1, but it might fit better in module 8? So go back and make those updates. Again, reflect what went well, what didn't. Review your notes from that facilitation guide. You know, go back and make those changes, because all of this stuff is going to create more engagement in your classes, more community. Everything that you're doing through these different phases is going to improve your online course. Oops. I just went away from the presentation. There it is. All right. So again, those phase 3 resources, the journal and facilitation guide, because you have access to that, it goes from getting started all the way down to week whatever, you know, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, and you can always add weeks. Then the course map, and then in the course, the end of semester checklist. What do you need to do at the end of semester? I like to, in the final reflections that my students submit or the final project, send a nice little personalized note to them, telling them thank you, wishing them the best of luck, or telling them, you know, I hope to see you in a future class, that sort of stuff. It's very personalized. And I do those things throughout the semester, especially with that feedback schedule, you know, making sure I hit every student. So make sure at the end of the term, you're still being present, you're still giving them that personalized, you're adding that personalized touch to your course. So this end of semester checklist is linked here. And definitely use this to make sure that if you have to close the course, if you have to submit final grades, you're checking off all the items, the things that need to be done. And now we're to the question part of the presentation. So I want to pause there to see if there's any questions. Feel free at this point to take off. You can put your mic on and have a conversation with me. I tried to rush a little bit because I didn't want to go too far over because of the technical issues. For the survey questions, are the questions open-ended? Yes, I do have some open-ended and also Likert questions for the students, but I have a mix. And you'll see that in the resources. Any other questions? Right now,
Nothing yet. Nothing yet.
all right. Let's get to the fun part. So here's a QR code. If I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do different things out there, as you see, sharing different resources, different jobs in instructional design, instructional technology. I do a Tech Tip Thursday where I again share free resources related to online learning and what you can do in your classes. So please, I would love to be connected with you and have a conversation with you. I do coffee chats for 15 minutes. I usually do it during my lunch or after work. So if you want to have a coffee chat, we can definitely do that. Just want to say thank you before I go into the final slide. I really appreciate you jumping into Zoom so quickly. And I hope you have some great takeaways from this presentation. I was very humbled by the fact that 600 people RSVP'd to this session. Oh, the QR code is not working. That's all right. Just you can find me from the session.
We also have one more question, Holly. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Excuse me.
yeah.
How will we know about your upcoming course on tech?
Oh, so I'm going to post another LinkedIn event and I'm going to get StreamYard to work so you can actually hear me. Yay. Okay, so here's that link and that QR code for all those different resources. This one should work. I tested everything. So it's going to take you to a Drive folder that has all the different things, and I will make sure that it works. Yep, everything's popping up. It has all the different phases. It has a copy of this presentation. Also the bit.ly link down here. So you have access to everything afterwards. So you can go back and review. And I just want to put up the resources slide because I did use some resources that I want to be sure I give credit to. But the important part is the takeaways. So thank you so much for coming to the session. And I can't wait to hear from some of you, and have a great fall semester. Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop.